Hey everyone, how's it going? So last time what we did is get this button working so that when we type into the text box it will enable, and when there's nothing in the text box it will disable again. What we're going to do now is get the button click set up so that when you press it, it will submit the post for us and load it down here. So we're going to go back. What I'm going to do first though is remove this third column text. I don't really want to see that anymore. So let's go back to main layout and just remove this span with third column. So this is essentially an empty div on the end. Yeah, so when you refresh the page, you just won't see that anymore. Okay, but going back to our common.js, what we're going to do is create a new handler. So this handler right here is the key up handler. We're going to do a similar sort of thing, but for the button press. So I've just collapsed that by clicking this little arrow right here, and it collapsed all the lines down, just so we don't have to keep seeing it. But what I'm going to do now is create a similar sort of selector, but this is going to be for the button itself, which has, where is it? Oh, it's in the mixins file. It has the ID of submit post button. So copy that, and let's paste it in there inside of double quotes. So paste it in there with the pound sign. Just make sure you got that too. So this is the element with the ID of submit post button, and then we're going to just say dot click. And then inside there, we'll put another callback function, which essentially means when this button is clicked, it will execute this function right here. So what we'll do first is something very similar to what we did above here. We got the event.target property and added it to a variable. So I'm going to copy that line there and just paste it below. But of course, this won't be the text box. This will be the button itself. So just rename this variable to button. And I'll just go ahead and close that down too. Now we do also want the text box though, because we're going to want to submit this form, and in order to submit their post we need to know what they've submitted, so we have to get this text box element. And if you go back to mixins.pug, you will see the text area right here has the ID post text area. So copy that, go in here, and let's create a variable for the text area. So we can just say text box equals inside double quotes, we've created a jQuery object with the ID post text area. So it's gone and got this element right here and stored it in a variable for us. Now underneath that, what we're going to do is configure the data we want to send with this request. So the data we're going to send to the server to create the post with. So data equals, and let's just create an object using curly brackets. So data is going to be the object containing the information we want to send to the server. It's basically going to be the post content. You know, what post are they trying to submit? And it's just going to have one property, content, and the value of this content property is going to be textbox.val. Because if you remember, I told you earlier that the val function gets you the value of this element. Now I've also added a semicolon there, so make sure you get rid of that. We don't have a semicolon inside of objects like this. Okay, if you want to declare another property, you'd have a comma and then you'd do the next property, but we're just going to have the one property now. Okay, so yeah. This data object now contains the content that was submitted, you know, the text box value. So now all there is to do is to actually submit this post. So we're essentially going to make an AJAX request, which will send the data to the server without us having to reload the page. So the way we're going to do that is by saying $.post, and this means you're submitting a post AJAX request. And we're going to submit the data to a specific URL, and the URL is going to be the URL that we're going to configure to handle the post submission. Now we don't have this yet, so we can't we don't have anything to put there, but I know what it will be. It's going to be API/post, and we're going to do this probably in the next video or something like that. So this we'll be doing real soon. We're then going to submit the data, and the last thing we want is a callback function. Now bear with me, I'm going to explain this in just a second. I just want to type it out first. So this callback function is going to be the function which is called or executed when the request to this URL has returned. So we're essentially sending this data to this URL, and then when it's done, it's going to come back and do this function here. But it's going to give us some data to work with. It's going to have post data. It's also going to have status, and lastly, it's going to have XHR. Now, XHR just stands for XML HTTP request. Essentially, this will just contain the status of the request. So if it succeeded, we're probably going to have a 200 code in there. If it didn't work, we'd probably return a 400. So the only thing we're going to do with this is just check the status of the call. It'll let us know whether this call succeeded or whether it failed, okay? So, yeah, this is the AJAX request we're going to do. Of course, the only thing left to do is to actually create this part. The only thing left to do is to create this endpoint for us to handle this request. That will create the post for us, and then we're going to return it here. And in here is where we will essentially just take the new post once it's been created and add it to the page. Probably just add it down here. Okay, so like I said, this won't work yet because we haven't created this. If you tried to run this, you'd probably see an error, but we can even try it out. If I refresh the page, add something in there and click on this, we should see an error in the console, and we do, saying 404 not found because we don't have this page yet. But we'll get to it in the next video.